In these polls, Hillary Clinton's unfave ratings are pretty bad. What are the implications of that now?
You know, I think it's really interesting. Her faves and unfaves are bad in those in that New Hampshire poll and that Iowa poll, and her faves and unfaves are also not terrific nationally. CNN was out in a poll where she's at 45-50. She's underwater in terms of her favorability, and that's what a lot of recent polls have showed. And listen, the irony here is, as the Republicans have all this drama in their nomination fight, this is a nomination worth having. Hillary Clinton's favorabilities are low, and in addition, the other number to pay attention to, and quite frankly has been a little bit of a surprise to me, is Barack Obama's job approval has remained underwater, and even after his good month of June, he's at 45-50.
So both those numbers are going to embolden Republicans to say, this is a nomination worth having.
Exactly, yep. Exactly.
John?
Ken, one of the noticeable things about these polls that have come, the NBC Marist polls in both Iowa and New Hampshire, and this has been true in other polls this whole cycle, everyone's unfavorable ratings are really high. I mean, it seems like none of these people are super popular, with the exception of a couple of folks we can talk about later, but basically everyone's pretty unpopular. Is the fact of the partisan polarization that is now such a feature of our politics, has that sort of kind of reset the bar on what a reasonable expectation of fave and unfave should be?
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to look at. Listen, the only people who aren't underwater, I think, are people who aren't well known enough to have high enough favorability ratings. But listen, we used to be in a world where some Republicans might have favorable views of Democrats, and some Democrats might have favorable views of Republicans, and independents who are either leaning towards one side or the other could also like the other side. Now, there's very much of a ceiling on these approval numbers, sort of a simple algebra problem. Hillary's favorability number is just about all the Democrats like her, and she's splitting independents, but all the Republicans dislike her. So there's a number she can't get over. So we're going to see a lot of models about how job approval and favorability influence ultimate results. And it may be the case that those old models that assumed that someone could get a 50, could get a 55, could get a 60 may not be so useful. So what's the expression? 40 might be the new 50 when it comes to favorability and job approval in this polarized world we're in.
Ken, let's talk about another thing that popped out of one of the polls regarding results and getting results, which was spending. You know a lot about television advertising and politics as well as polling. John Kasich was basically at 0 in New Hampshire, 1 or 0. And they spent close to $2 million on New Hampshire television, Boston television, on a 60-second spot that ran over several weeks. And this poll, and a private poll that I was told about, shows them at 7%. Is spending about $2 million to go from 1 to 7%? Is that a good return on investment? Is that about what you'd expect?
Well, for John Kasich, it's a good return because he was at 0 and he needed to get to 7 to get into the conversation. But it's sort of a great social science experiment, and excuse me for being the geek that I am, but rarely do you have television advertising air war when there's only one person up. And you had John Kasich, who was the only person up. And we're simply not going to see that very much as the primaries go, and we certainly won't see that when it comes to the general election. So that is at the very, very, very upper bound of the sort of effects we'd like to see from advertising, or we would expect to see from advertising.
Right. And I should say, of course, he was also campaigning and was in the state during part of the survey, so that may have played a role as well. But if you're the only, again, but it points at the fact, if you're the only person with the megaphone, your message can get heard. Right. And jumping from 0 to 7, again, that's not a surprise to you? That seems about right for being on the air, $2 million by yourself?
Actually sounds even high to me. So that's at the very high range of what I would expect to see for an advertising impact. And I don't think we're going to see advertising moving any numbers 7% for the next 15 months.
Right.
Ken, Mark's got a piece up on our website at BloombergPolitics.com right now about Bernie Sanders and the threat that he poses to Hillary Clinton, which is real and substantial. Can you talk about the numbers in these polls in Iowa and New Hampshire and what you can divine from them about Bernie Sanders and his prospects?
Yeah, so in both those polls in Iowa and New Hampshire, you see Hillary Clinton still ahead, but you see Bernie Sanders in significantly better shape than he was just a few months ago, and also getting lots of momentum and lots of media coverage. We'll give Mark the softball, but I think one of the really good points that Mark makes in his article is we also have to look at the indirect effects of Bernie-mentum. And I think sitting here, the three of us don't expect Bernie Sanders to be the Democratic nominee and see some limits for him in the primaries that will follow. But as he puts pressure on Hillary Clinton, as he makes Hillary Clinton go farther to the left, it gets back to our initial conversation here. It makes Hillary Clinton a less formidable general election candidate, which makes that Republican nomination worth having and really valuable.
Ken, quickly, you've got a piece up on our website, BloombergPolitics.com, now about these two polls, looking at some of the methodology and the internals in them. Just tell us what you found there.
Yeah. One thing I worry in all the polling, virtually all the polling that we are seeing from the media on the primary, is that their samples are way too big. I don't mean the sample of people they're talking to, but the target population that sample represents. So in Iowa, the Marist poll, if you do the geeky math, their sample of Republicans actually multiplies out to 770,000 caucus goers.
That's
well, the largest
bigger
Republican caucus ever was 150,000.